So thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Group Against Smog and Pollution, GASP is a more than 50-year-old organization that has been helping to improve air quality in southwestern Pennsylvania through education and advocacy and legal work, policy work, in order to safeguard human, environmental, and economic health in the region. And so this type of event is just one of the ways in which we help to educate people about these air quality and environmental issues. And this new series, this Making the Connection series, the goal of it is really to educate people about the connections between air pollution, health, climate change, waste, and just the choices that we make every day in our whether it's at school or work at home, those choices we make every day and how they're impacting the environment. And so whether we're talking about food waste or fast fashion or transportation or cleaning products or what have you, there is some sort of connection to air quality in the environment. And this series is going to attempt to explore those issues in greater depth and offer an opportunity for folks to ask questions. And then an additional goal of this project is to expose participants to the many organizations and businesses in the Pittsburgh region who are working to make our world a better, greener, and more sustainable place to live, work, and play. And so thank you again for joining us. Okay, so we're ready to get started and to talk about the problem in more detail and to discuss solutions and really what is going on locally around combating this problem. We have three distinguished speakers with us tonight. We have Aurora Sharrard from the University of Pittsburgh's Office of Sustainability, Leah Shuck from Sustainable Stitches, and Tereneh Idia from Idia'Dega. And so I want to just thank all of our speakers for making time to be with us this evening and to present on this important topic. And so without further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker tonight, and that is Aurora Sharrard. Dr. Aurora Sharrard is the Director of Sustainability at the University of Pittsburgh, leading implementation of the Pitt Sustainability Plan, which formalizes decades of university-led and partnered green initiatives. In pursuit of the plan's 61 goals, Dr. Sharrard leads Pitt's Office of Sustainability, a cross-departmental sustainability staff and university-wide sustainability strategy, activities, policies, collaborations, and partnerships. In her time at Pitt, Dr. Sharrard has led and partnered on many university sustainability achievements, including committing to carbon neutrality by 2037, 2 local renewable power purchase agreements, signing the Cool Food Pledge, adding textile recycling to campus, achieving B Campus USA designation, advancing the Pitt Green Office Lab and Environments program, creating 2 core sustainability attribute codes, and developing the university's first sustainability dashboard. Prior to joining the university, Dr. Sharrard worked at Green Building Alliance for 11 years, ultimately serving as its executive director. Dr. Sharrard serves on boards for the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services, and Will Allen Foundation. Aurora holds a master's and PhD in civil and environmental engineering with an emphasis in green design from Carnegie Mellon University, as well as a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Tulane University. So without further delay, let me turn over the hosting powers to you, Aurora.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at the University of Pittsburgh related to textile recycling and the journey that we've been on to get here. So at Pitt, we define sustainability as balancing equity, environment, and economics so current and future generations can thrive. And this is a definition created by our Chancellor's Advisory Council on Sustainability. As Rachel said in my introduction, we're implementing the Pitt Sustainability Plan, which came out in January 2018. It has 61 goals across 15 impact areas, crossing the entire slate of sustainability. So we're working on a lot of different things. One of those goals is to reduce landfill waste 25% by the year 2030 from our 2017 levels. And, you know, as a university, we have some traditional waste diversion approaches for landfill recycling and compostables and streamlining what that looks like for folks on campus. One of our big journeys over the past 2 years has actually been in composting. Students love composting, faculty and staff love composting. We've really been growing the ability of people to do that in different locations across campus. However, I would be remiss if I didn't start a conversation about textiles with starting a conversation about reuse first. And the university has really been in this journey since 2014. We have a number of reuse programs on campus, usually focused on dining, bring your own bag, bring your own mug, choose to reuse reusable containers. Almost all of these programs are on hold due to COVID. However, in 2014 and 15, the university had a program called Give a Thread. The effort was to break a Guinness World Record during orientation week, and it was something that the incoming class traditionally did. In this year, they chose to try to break the Guinness World Record of pieces of clothing collected, aiming for about 150,000 pieces of clothing. It was a large effort. They did not end up breaking the world record, but they did collect 112,000 pieces of clothing. It was quite the effort. And, rooms, large ballrooms at the university were filled with clothing. And then the university donated it to other locations across southwestern Pennsylvania. One of those efforts was actually an on-campus university thrift store called the University of Pittsburgh. It was founded in 2015. It was actually created from a student idea. It was funded by the University Student Green Fund, who really believed in it. It's located in the O'Hara Student Center, which is on O'Hara Street, right off of Thackeray, if you're looking to make a donation. And it is still operational today. It's a pretty small space. They're looking to grow. And in COVID, they've actually moved into online sales to really serve the student audience. Another textile diversion program that the university's been perpetuating for a long time is called Clutter for a Cause. We do this during move out, during move in, and during summer when students are likely to move around apartments in Oakland. We partner with the Oakland Planning and Development Corporation in this effort, which is really focused on the entire neighborhood of Oakland in Pittsburgh. And between 2017 and 2019, we've collected over 43,000 pounds of clothing and small household items, much of which goes to the University of Pittsburgh to be redeployed to Pitt students, but some of which gets donated to Goodwill and St. Vincent de Paul across the city. And, not to be left out of the journey, Pitt Athletics last year with the whole Pitt rebranding of athletics uniforms for all sports, they really didn't want all of those off-brand materials to end up in a landfill, so they partnered with a nonprofit called Managers on a Mission, who takes these materials and either resells them or diverts them from the landfill via other means. And they collected over 1,000 pounds of outdated apparel from athletics alone. So given all of these things over time and the fact that we had this new plan on campus for sustainability. We were looking at ways with the single stream recycling market really hitting a global bottom to try to look at these specialty recyclables and divert them from the landfill. Knowing that the average American puts about 82 pounds of textiles in the landfill, having our own reuse outlet for those on campus, we were really thinking, what can and should we be doing here? We also looked at all the numbers that Rachel alluded to earlier, really looking at the full life cycle of textiles and thinking, there's a huge environmental impact of all these textiles from the fashion industry overall. We really need to think about this a little bit more deeply, and we'll be positively affecting all of those impact areas in the Pitt Sustainability Plan off campus, but via on-campus activities. Additionally, water's a big issue in Pittsburgh, and really putting, facts to what it takes. So over 2,000 liters to produce just a shirt and a pair of pants, really started getting a lot of the sustainability folks thinking about what could we be doing better here in terms of our textiles. That's not to say that the US doesn't already recycle a number of textiles every year, and you're going to hear a couple of great examples of that. Today, it's about 2 million tons, equivalent, depending if you're converting to plastics, which a lot of textiles are, to about 2.65 million tons of plastics. So just really thinking about that full circular economy is something that we're really trying to get into, not just from the operations standpoint, but also on the research side at the university. And there are other cities that have actually done deep analyses in what their waste diagrams look like. So this is from the city of Charlotte. They did a deep dive on all of their waste flows and where they started on the left and where they end up to on the right. And you can see this little tiny red box over here for textiles, which represent about 5.7% of all the waste in the city of Charlotte. And almost all of those are ending up in the landfill with a very small percentage going into recycling. We know this is, you could write City of Pittsburgh at the top of this list too, and it would probably look pretty similar or with even less going into recycling. And also looking at the full life cycle of textiles, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't sending textiles to a landfill or a processing plant or somewhere that was really harming the people who lived near those facilities. And so we really thought very deeply about who we wanted to partner with, how we should go about that partnership, and really, just trying to be considerate about the whole scenario. Also, a lot of textiles are made internationally these days. At Pitt, basic needs and food security and housing security are part of our operations. And so making the connection between international garment workers experiencing the same basic needs complications that some of our students do into what we're doing with textiles really helps, close the loop of conversation for us at the university. So we started out saying, well, what happens to our clothing once it's recycled? If we even, found a partner who could do this for us. And this is some basic information from the Atlantic from 2014. Somewhere, just south of 50% is worn as secondhand clothing. And we know that there's a great reuse market in Pittsburgh and elsewhere, and we wanted to continue to help that thrive. But we also wanted to get at this other, 50% that could be cut down and used as industrial rags, ground down and reprocessed. And the partner that we ended up with actually diverts a lot of secondhand clothing that maybe won't be sold in the US or can't be sold in the US to other countries and not just developing nations. I forget the exact number, but a good percentage of what they resell ends up in European countries that will then repair those textiles and resell them, which makes me feel yet bad about being American for another reason. But it is something to think about, that there might be a reuse option not in the United States for these items. And then what we're really trying to think about on the research side as a university is, how do you close the loop? How do you make this a full circular economy? This is just an example out of that Circular Charlotte report from Metabolic that shows, the red line on the top is just textiles straight into the landfill after they're used, and then a re-envisioning of what could you actually use these textiles for. I'm not going to say we're there yet as a university, as a city in the United States, but this is a great future vision of other ways and approaches that we could consider. So when we looked at finding a textile recycling partner as a university, we found a lot of options, but none of them were really great. When you start digging into what these textile recycling entities actually are and where they go, there are a lot of questions. There are a couple national exposés that have gone on, and we really didn't find a great one. We couldn't just pick up the phone and call Planet Aid and say, bring us a bin. That really did not meet our threshold for a partner. So we ended up doing a lot of research and finding Simple Recycling. They are a for-profit organization, as a lot of textile recyclers are. They run curbside recycling in a number of communities around the country. This is just a screenshot of some of those communities within a 500-mile radius of Pittsburgh. So they run curbside recycling in Cleveland, Cincinnati, a lot in Massachusetts, North Carolina, Michigan, and also Texas. They have a nice cluster. They do this at zero cost to cities and residents. And so we do have a hope that with us starting a partnership with them, that might open the door to the city of Pittsburgh, eventually considering a curbside model in Pittsburgh. They do monthly pickups from Pitt, and they are based in Cleveland. So they're in the region. But there were no providers in southwestern Pennsylvania that were trustworthy enough for us and responsive enough for us to partner with. So what we did in January 2020 is we launched our textile recycling program. So this is pretty new. You'll note we launched in January 2020 and campus closed in mid-March 2020. So we only had about 2.5 months of operations of the program. Despite that, we've had just south of 8,000 pounds of textile materials, I shouldn't have said waste, opportunity picked up from the university so far. And we have almost exactly that still waiting for simple recycling on their next pickup to come pick it up. We have actually 20 barrels around campus to collect textiles right now. As you can see on the signage on the left, we heavily consider people to consider reuse first by donating wearable clothing and accessories to the University of Pittsburgh and other reuse stores. And really in our messaging pushed, bring us the things that you think are no longer unusable and that you would otherwise put in the trash. It needs to be clean, but we will help it make it find its way back into the circular economy. And with that, I think I am done. So I am going to turn it back over to Rachel.
So our next presenter this evening is Leah Shuck. And Leah is a visual arts teacher at West Allegheny High School and a self-taught sewer and self-proclaimed responsible consumer. She shares her personal journey in sustainability via her social media pages and blog posts found as Sustainable Stitches. There you will find things like upcycled fashion and artwork, gardening, sustainable product reviews, and more. But her focus is mainly on upcycling and mending clothes to extend their longevity, researching before you buy, and loving and caring for what you already have. Leah obtained her bachelor's degree in art education from Seton Hill University and her master's degree from Carlow University, where her thesis was on sustainability in the art classroom. She incorporates sustainable processes and upcycling into her curriculum, as well as her own artwork. Leah serves on the board of the Pennsylvania Art Education Association and on the board of the West Hills Art League. Leah incorporates her love of the environment in all aspects of her life to best spread the message of sustainability and conservation. So Leah, I'm going to now turn over the hosting powers to you.
Hello, I have a page, not really a business so much as it is a hobby and a lifestyle that I started called Sustainable Stitches. I create all different kinds of art, but I mostly focus on upcycling clothes and other fibers. I always loved arts and crafts as a kid, and when I got my first sewing kit when I was about 10 years old, it was a real game changer for me. I started making clothes for my dolls and making dolls, and most of the fabric that I was using were remnants from women from the bowling alley, my local bowling alley, who made their husband's shirts or hemmed their husband's pants. And I really like to think I was doing the whole use what you have thing before it was a hashtag on Instagram. I was also really influenced by my mother and grandmother who both sewed. As an adult, I still use my grandmother's pinking shears and sewing scissors. I just have to get them sharpened every now and then at Ultimari's. The first sewing machine I ever used, pictured here, was my mother's sewing machine, and it was the first thing she ever bought on credit in the early 1970s as a teen. And I only recently gave it back to her after buying my own from Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse. So I like to think of it as kind of a special symbolism that there's this sort of thread tying, the women in my family together through sewing. So as I got older, I pretty much just sewed sporadically. I made things when I needed them or wanted them or gifts for other people. As a high school student, I made Powerpuff Girl costumes for a Halloween dance, altered friends' prom dresses, took in t-shirts. I made the ring bearer pillows for my sister's wedding, made dog toys to donate to a local animal shelter. I made a t-shirt quilt, from high school and college. and then a onesie quilt for my sister. She saved all of my nephew's outfits from his first year of life. But in the spring of 2017, I heard Tereneh Idia speak at an educator event at the Carnegie Museum of Art for the Iris van Herpen exhibit. And this really opened my eyes and mind to the negative effects of the fast fashion industry on the environment, which in turn made me open my sewing box for a whole new cause. I was really excited when Tereneh agreed to come to our school for an upcycled fashion workshop with our high school art club. And the first piece of upcycled clothing I actually ever made is pictured here in the top right. I made a shawl out of an old dress. At Tereneh's talk at the Carnegie Museum, I learned that Americans throw away an average of 81 pounds of clothing a year. I learned that you can tell the color of next fall's fashion lines by looking to the dye-polluted rivers of China, Bangladesh, or Vietnam. And I learned that it takes 713 gallons of water to produce one t-shirt. And I remember being absolutely shocked. So from there, I just didn't stop. Growing up kind of frugal in a household of hand-me-downs, I had a lot of raw materials to work with because I was still wearing a lot of the same old clothes and I hadn't really ever gotten rid of much, ever. And the more I upcycled too, the more people I knew would give me things like old clothes and fabrics to experiment with. But my biggest issue at the time and even now is that as I get older and I'm keeping these clothes, my body has changed and they don't quite fit anymore. And my fear, which Aurora touched on a little bit, is what happens to clothes if you donate them to Goodwill and they don't sell. So my fear was that they would end up in a landfill anyway. So I decided to try to charge myself with upcycling them to make them fit. So this was my very first attempt at home of an upcycle. The dark blue shirt on the left was too tight in the shoulders and had actually ripped and I mended it once. The shirt in the middle I've actually had since high school and is too tight entirely from the chest down. So I took both parts of those shirts that still fit and I sewed them together. This was a fabulous beginner project for me because there was no stretch to the fabric. And if you are going to consider beginning upcycling, that's a really good place that I would recommend you start, is with fabrics and clothes that don't stretch. A little quick tip I can also give you is that if you're trying to join two things together that are having a different circumference, you can add pleats, like I added here, to make the blue shirt a little bit smaller so that it fit and could be sewed onto the lighter blue shirt. My next upcycle was a really similar style, the color blocking, but this was a stretch material. This was a cotton blend. So you don't need to have a serger to sew cotton blends or stretch materials because most sewing machines do have stretch stitch options on them. But it is tricky. I definitely recommend you practice on scraps first because your tension on your sewing machine, which is how tightly or loosely your stitches come out when you sew, can be tricky to figure out with the stretch fabrics. So you can see along the seam line there that there was still a little bit of puckering, but I actually really love the results and I wear this shirt a lot. So my next project was recreating the shirt I'm wearing here when I was about 4 or 5 years old. My parents retired and sold the bowling alley I mentioned before after owning and operating it for 31 years. So we wanted to recreate this photo. So I used one of my grandma's old shirts to make a similar top. To complete this project, I took in the sides and the sleeves. I learned about a basting stitch to create the peplum for the bottom. And I used some iron-on interfacing to keep the neckline from stretching out that I had cut a bit deeper. And I actually used my first decorative stitch on my sewing machine for the neckline as well. So something I will tell you when you're learning to upcycle and sew is just to be prepared to learn a lot along the way. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I made a lot of mistakes and I did a lot of seam ripping. But in the end, it's really worth it. And the results came out pretty fun. That was appreciated by my family. So from there, I just didn't want to stop. I wanted to make new clothes out of old clothes all the time. And I also started using patterns too. So the shirt on the bottom left, I sort of freehanded the pattern. And the shirt on the top, I utilized this McCall's pattern out, and I made this out of an old dress that was too short, my junior prom dress, a skirt from middle school, and the light blue is a failed batik experiment. Here are some more of my upcycles. The shirt on the top left was a little too small. It was from my first year teaching at West Day. I can't wear small anymore. So again, I used one of my grandma's shirts to make it a little bit bigger on the sides and in the sleeves. And I just added the plaid fabric to that tank top to spruce it up a bit. This is a sweater that was given to me by a friend who knew I loved to experiment with clothes. I wasn't crazy about the design on the front, so I decided to flip the sweater and make the back the front. And then I utilized the old front to trace onto some fabric I got from Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse to create a new piece that was more wearable to my style. This project was a real game changer for me. I had bought this blazer again when I first started teaching, and I felt all this pressure to look professional, but the sleeves have become too tight. So what I did was I utilized an old pair of leggings, and I made those the sleeves. So again, if you look at the shoulder, you can see I utilized some pleating, again, to make the circumferences match so that the two things I was sewing together fit a little better. This was a piece that I made from a pattern that I got from Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse for a coat. The body of the jacket was made from embroidery fabric that was donated to me by a coworker. The sleeves, again, I used my pant leg trick, and the back was donated fleece, and then I also added pockets to this pattern. This woven fabric did have a stretch to it, so again, I tested it, and my sewing machine kind of chewed it up a little bit. So to finish the edges, I hand sewed on some bias tape. Knowing how to sew is a really empowering skill. Even without a sewing machine, you can learn to alter your own clothes to make them fit better. And you can also make some extra money on the side doing alterations. A friend brought me this dress she wanted to wear to a wedding, but she wanted the length to be shorter. So I utilized the fabric from the bottom to add a gusset in the back because the dress was also too tight on her. So if you don't know what a gusset is, it's just when you add in that little piece of fabric in, I don't know what you would describe that shape, sort of conical, I guess. And you can do that to pants as well. But the best part of learning to sew and mending is that it's good for the environment, and upcycling your clothes is a great way to practice your creativity. One of the ways I've been challenging myself to practice my sustainability and creativity is by upcycling these live-in furniture fabric samples. My boyfriend's mom works there, and when they retire a pattern, they have to discard those samples. So she always looks for places to donate those instead of throwing them away. And some of the things I've made with them so far are aprons, reusable snack bags that I've called the scrap snack sack, banners, artwork, and stuffed animals. But have I had refashion fails and sewing screw-ups? Yes. Do I have unfinished projects piling up in the corner? Yes. But I believe that when you purchase a piece of clothing, you're making a commitment, and we have to keep trying. By bringing a piece of clothing into your home, you become responsible for it, for how the fibers were sourced, how the workers were treated, how the dyes were disposed of, and that's all of us. That's our responsibility. And the more stuff we buy, the more stuff they make, hence the term fast fashion. And the more stuff we throw away, the more we've contributed to pollution. According to the website Remake, globally, 80% of discarded textiles are doomed for the landfill or incineration. Only 20% are actually reused or recycled. The clothing that ends up in landfills can sit for 20 plus years, and as it decomposes, it emits methane, a greenhouse gas more potent than carbon. You might not believe it, but I actually had a conversation with one of my 10th grade students, and she didn't know what a landfill was. She didn't know what happened to her holey sweaters or snack wrappers after she threw them in the trash. So if people don't even know what landfills are, we can be pretty certain that they don't know about textiles specifically, about how the dyes and chemicals can leach into the soil, polluting both surface and groundwater, and that textiles produce more methane as they decompose, which contributes to global warming. But if you're not feeling ready yet to upcycle your clothes, that's okay. I have a couple of other ideas for you that you might find more approachable. For example, this is an image that I took in my backyard of my clothesline. Not only does line drying your clothes save money on gas and electric, but it's actually gentler on your clothes than the dryer, so it would help them to last longer. My next suggestion is to love and care for the clothes you already have the best that you can. That way you don't have to buy more. So other than line drying, if you can not wash your clothes after every use if possible, but also to find good laundry care products that fit your needs. I know there's a lot of options out there, but my personal favorite is Method brand. It smells really good. It's very cost comparable to other leading brands. It doesn't irritate my skin, and the company has values that I find admirable. They make green investments to offset their carbon emissions. 1/3 of their shipping is powered by biodiesel. Their factories are powered by renewable energy. Their plastic packaging is made from 100% recycled plastic. Their products are never tested on animals, and they're working towards zero waste manufacturing. Another really good suggestion is to participate in a circular gifting economy. I don't know how many of you are on Facebook, but there is a great group called Buy Nothing. You can find your group at that link there. I can share that out later. It's a really nice group because what happens is you gift your clothes and other things you don't want to your neighbors. So not only does that help you to meet the people around you in your community, but you also have an understanding that being part of a circular gift economy is that after they're finished with something, there's a greater chance that it's going to be repurposed back into that community. I actually got this pattern and the lace trim from my local Buy Nothing group, and the sweater was donated to me by a friend. My next suggestion is to buy used and to buy local. There's really no need for companies to be producing so much new clothing at a fast rate if we support our local secondhand stores and designers. I live west of the city, so some of my favorites are out this direction: the Savvy Fox, Goodwill, Consignment Cottage, and St. Vincent de Paul. You can also check out the list of local designers that GASP put together and put out on their social media page. Another suggestion that's a pretty easy one is to just learn how to mend. If you want to learn how to darn your socks, there's a really good link here for how to do that. If you want to learn how to hem your pants, that's something really easily attainable just with hand sewing as well. And you can also learn how to make a patch. This is a dog bed I made for my dog Xander 9 years ago, and the only way I've been able to keep it going this long is by mending it. So the lines that you see were hand sewn. But the patches I've added just recently because the bed's getting pretty old, so it needed some extra love. Another suggestion I would tell you is to encourage you to look around and notice when you shop, and also to maybe even do a little bit of research before you shop, because there are out there companies that are making positive changes. And also, if you love a store but you don't love their business practices, ask them to make changes, write them letters and tell them that you expect more. Another really good thing to know is what's in your clothes. If you can look for sustainably sourced natural materials like cotton, hemp, flax, sisal, jute, or wood, and avoid synthetic fabrics and even some blends, as they typically undergo a chemical process. If you want to learn more about different types of fabrics, I found a really nice blog post that explains what to look for. Looking for greener alternatives does take a little more time, but making simple and small switches is a great first step in the right direction. According to the EPA, in the year 2017 alone, 16.9 million tons of textiles were produced and 11.2 million tons headed to the landfill. But with some of these ideas that we have, we can help to stop all this madness. If you do decide that you want to start upcycling, I would highly recommend that you check out Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse. They are currently closed to the public now because of COVID, but they have an online store. Their merchandise varies online, but in store they have all your sewing needs, from fabric to thread, bobbins, buttons, mannequins, machines, and more. Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse accepts donated materials, and they sell them at a very affordable price. And it's almost like a thrift store for art. If you want to start an upcycled clothing project and you need some inspiration or are not sure where to start, these are some of my favorite pages. On YouTube, I follow Cool Urpa, Blueprint DIY, and Sarah Tayu. And again, on Facebook, if you're into that, there's a great group that Blueprint DIY puts together called Renegade Upcycles, where people help each other out. They ask questions, they share their projects. And then on Instagram, I would highly recommend the page Fashion Revolution. There they talk about the slow fashion movement, who makes your clothes, what's in your clothes, and how you can make a difference. If you want to see more of my makes and upcycles, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Etsy. Or you can check out my blog at sustainablestitches.earth/blog. There I talk about product reviews, more in-depth looks at my projects, including step-by-step instructions. Like these upcycled mittens I made from old sweaters. You can even download the pattern and make them yourself. So I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
And so our final speaker tonight is Tereneh Idia, and she is a designer for Idia'Dega, a global eco-design collaboration of women artisans, and a writer focused on issues of justice in environment, society, design, arts, and culture. She is Pittsburgh Style Week's Designer of the Year for 2019, a 2018 Artisan Leader at the Nest Hermes Convening on American Craft in New York City. She is an inductee into the Taylor Alderdice High School Hall of Fame and a Carol R. Brown Creative Achievement Award Emerging Artist. She has designed costumes for Pearl Arts Studios' Stacy Pearl Dance Project. Idia'Dega has presented work in Paris, New York City, Nairobi, Copenhagen, and Pittsburgh, including exhibitions at the August Wilson African American Cultural Center, the Frick Pittsburgh Center, the Frick Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse, and upcoming at the Carnegie Museum of Art. As a writer, she is a Golden Quill 2019 winner and a 2020 nominated columnist for the Pittsburgh City Paper. Her writing also appears in Pittsburgh Public Source, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Afropunk.com, The North Star, and the book Tender, a literary anthology and book of spells, Evidence. So I will turn it over to you now. I'm going to bring up your slides, and then you can just tell me to advance.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And it's I'm really excited to be a part of this. It's great to see you, Leah. So I want to talk a little bit about what I do as a designer, and then talk about what we can do as a community in terms of thinking about sustainability. So I always like to start whenever I talk about what we do with the women that I work with. So I work with Oneida Native American women and Maasai women, and Idia'Dega is about creating a new fashion system. And I'll go into that as we go further along into the talk. So we can go to the next slide. That's Mary Cook and Holly Gibson of the Oneida Indian Nation. Those are two of my amazing partners. Okay, and next. So we have 3 different visions that we like to implement in what we do. The first thing is to look at creative force, not labor force. A lot of times when brands talk about the fact that they work with artisans, they don't have the autonomy and the agency to design and to create and collaborate. And when I work with women that I work with, we actually really create and collaborate together. So we really talk about how can we make sure that the indigenous communities and partners that we work with are part of the whole process. And next slide. And that's Holly again, working on a piece. And next slide. So we look at how indigenous and developing world artisans are equal contributors and creative partners. A lot of times when I talk about working with women in Africa or women that live on the Indian reservation, I get a lot of, oh, you must be helping them, or you must be teaching them. And I always say, you know that story or the saying that says, if you teach a man to fish, then he'll learn how to fish forever. I always say that these women invented fishing. So there's really nothing I can teach people who have been doing design and innovation for millennia. So I just wanted to be able to partner with them and provide an opportunity for them to sell their work to a larger community of people around the world. And next slide. And also in the same way that we don't think that the earth is flat, at least I hope no one listening here thinks the earth is flat, but the earth is round. And next slide. And so we try to think of globalization for good. And I know that globalization is often used as a term and also implemented in a way that is not good for the environment. But I try to think about it, how can we engage to benefit the entire world? How can we use the same environmental systems of water flow, of cycles to really create a circular economy and also circular influence and innovation? All too often, the design of fashion comes from the global west and north, and the global south and east are the labor. But how can we engage and benefit the entire world so that we're working together, benefiting not only the human family, but beyond the human family as well? And next slide. And next.
It's not letting me advance.
Okay. Is it just kind of stuck?
Let me just go ahead and like restart that part.
Okay, no problem. And when we think about sustainability, one of the things that we also wanted to make sure that we included, especially since we're working with people who are in the global margins in terms of maintaining their land, their heritage, and their culture, is that sustainability should also include human creativity, innovation, as well as nature's. So the idea is that in order to sustain nature, I really like to think about of us sustaining each other. How can we look beyond just who's next door, but who is in our human family, and how can we help support one another? And next slide, please. So I'll just give you a few examples of some of the work that we're doing. So this is a hemp and organic cotton silk satin dress that was made and co-designed by the Logosali Maasai women artisans and myself, inspired by Rimas Mary, who's one of the women that live and work in Ologosali, Kenya, which is a Maasai village in about 2 hours south of Nairobi, where about 500 Maasai live. And this dress will be actually the dress that's featured in an exhibit at the Carnegie Museum later this year. And next slide. These are pieces that include soy, or I call it tofu jersey, and other hemp silk, and also hemp tweed, as well as some recycled silk. And I said I work with both Maasai and Oneida women. So what we like to do is actually combine African American, Maasai, and Oneida heritage culture stories in order to be the theme that we then build upon, and that we then design upon. This is actually from the Healing collection, and the inspiration was the idea of women being the healers of the community, but also in a lot of communities, the first scientists, the ones that discovered the herbs and the roots that were the first medicines of humanity. And next slide. And this is another group from the Healing collection. And I don't know if you can see that really well on the white shirt. There's some natural elements from the Oneida Indian nation that are healing, which includes maple leaves, rosebuds, and also strawberry blossoms that are used in traditional medicine. So we really wanted to, and in our fashion, we like to be able to educate and inspire people as well as clothe them, because I think fashion at the end of the day is one of the earliest art forms of humanity, and I like to turn it back into something that's beautiful in all the meaning of that word, beautiful. And next slide. So when I went to graduate school, in Kenya. And when I initially went, I got my master's in fashion design. I did not go with the idea of becoming a sustainable designer. I actually just went there because I wanted to learn how to make pretty dresses and sell them to people. But one of the things that I was able to do, I did a lot of community service while I was in Nairobi, and I met an organic cotton farmer. He was actually a traditional cotton farmer, and traditional cotton farmers use a lot of pesticides in order to grow their cotton. And he was converting into organic cotton. And when he found out that I was studying fashion, he was really interested in talking with me because he wanted to encourage me to be one of the people that actually bought his organic cotton, because he talked about his fear of changing from traditional cotton, which he knew he could sell and grow and sell, to organic cotton, which he didn't know if he could grow and sell. Because not only was his family dependent on him to succeed, but also lots of other families were dependent on him to succeed. And I told him that when I graduated, I was going to actually use organic cotton, and I've been able to do that. And so that was really what spurred me to get interested in sustainable fashion and design. The next slide. So a lot of the things that we talked about already, but one of the things that I think is really important to highlight is that the fashion industry is one of the leading polluting industries in the world, both in terms of water, global emissions, and also landfills, as we talked about. It's also a huge industry. One in 6 people work in the fashion industry, and a lot of those people, the majority, are women. So when we talk about the fashion industry and we talk about the supply chain, we really are talking about not only an environmental issue, racial justice issue, we're also talking about gender and gender justice issue as well. And next slide. And we also talked earlier about the waste and how we don't wear the clothes that we buy, and the clothes that we buy, we don't keep them as long. So we really want to encourage people to buy less and to buy smarter. And next slide. And we talked again about how fast fashion is really a disaster for women and the environment. And I'll get a little bit more into this later, but the idea of going in and buying that brand new $10, $12, $15 dress, which is very compelling, and but how does that $15 dress that's made in Bangladesh or made in Vietnam end up in a shop in Pittsburgh? And how does that actually, who gets paid and who doesn't get paid in order to get that $15 dress to that store? And that's something that I think we have to think about and consider, and try to move ourselves as close as we can with our choices to be as sustainable as possible. Okay. This is an image from EcoWatch, and Leah had actually hinted at this, and being able to, there was one of the things she had talked about when I did my talk at the Carnegie a few years ago was people being able to really truly look at next year's hot colors just by looking at the water and looking at the dyes that are polluted in the water. And the important thing too to think about is, although this is the source, this is an example of the source of where clothes are made, every time we wash our clothes, we are reintroducing dyes and toxins and other things into the water. So it's something to think about, again, when we choose what to buy and what we choose what to wear. The next slide. We talked a little bit about this as well, looking at when we donate clothes, what happens to them. This was a story actually about Rwanda that was really adamantly prohibiting the U.S. from letting us dump our old clothes into countries that don't necessarily want our old clothes. And some people are surprised by this idea, like, well, don't these poor countries want clothes, our old clothes? But a lot of our old clothes have actually decimated local economies and local textile production, and have superseded traditional clothing and traditional textile methods. So when we are donating clothes, we also have to think about where these clothes go and how they're used, because that's something that affects the cultural, the economic, the environmental, and the heritage of the places where these clothes might end up. Someone had mentioned this earlier before we started talking, and the interest in looking at microplastics. And when I first started thinking about microplastics and how they are introduced into the environment, I really focused it on water. And I always talked about the idea of, if you're washing your clothes, to use a bag that can then capture the microplastics that you can then remove from the water. But reading this article that came out fairly recently, I realized that actually wearing polyester and other synthetic clothing also sheds microplastic. This report says it sheds even more than washing. So it's something that also to consider and think about. And how do we create a system where we're not wasting and not destroying the environment at every turn, from washing the clothes to wearing the clothes, from making the clothes to dyeing the clothes. So it's something that is such a huge industry that we really have to try to do the best that we can, and take step-by-step approaches in order to do the best for the human family, the beyond human family, and the environment. And next slide, please. So thinking about the microplastics, I won't read this whole thing, but it really does have a huge impact on ecosystems. It has a huge impact on animals and fish life that are going to ingest the microplastics, whether it's through the bloodstream. They can cause blockages, physical injury, and also changes in oxygen level that alters behavior, reduce energy levels, and impacts growth and reproduction. So microplastic is something that is huge. And if we go to the next slide, I think we might even talk about how, so where microplastics come from. Before I found this, this document, I really actually thought you would see more through the automotive industry, tires and things like that. But no, clothing, the #1 source of microplastics in the oceans come from clothing and textiles. So again, the things that we wear, the things that we don't really think about, the things that the fashion industry doesn't talk about enough, we're again #1 and #2 in terms of pollution. And it's something that's really, it's something that we have to do both industry level, both as me as a designer, and both and as a consumer, things that we have to take care of. And next slide. So I'm really looking at these 3 kind of elements: slow fashion, ethical fashion, eco fashion, and lasting fashion, and how we can do what we can do both from a consumer to the big industry people, and how we can focus on that. So slow fashion is really lasting fashion, things that are upcycled, recycled, things that are mended. Ethical fashion are things that, like the things that we do at Idia'Dega, which is creating new fashion, but with sustainable fabrics. And next slide. So one of the things that I'm really interested in terms of eco fashion, slow fashion, and being responsible is changing the fashion system. Because right now I feel like the fashion system is very opaque and impersonal. We don't know who made our clothes. We don't know where they're made. We don't know how they're made. I remember a few months ago, I did a Instagram story where I showed from the beginning to the end of making a garment, from sketching to finally like hemming the piece and sewing on a button. And it was amazing. The majority of the people who watched it contacted me and said, I did not know that that's how clothes are made. It is like a bigger mystery than, you know, sending a Land Rover on Mars or something. Like, people just don't know how clothes are made. So changing the fashion system from opaque and impersonal to transparent and very personal is something that I want to do. So that's why I always start with those images of the women that I work with to show who made our clothes. So as much as you can, find out who, why, where your clothes are made. And next slide. And also think about the slow fashion, slow clothing manifesto. Textile Beat Slow Clothing is a website that I like to look at, and there's like 10 ways to reduce your material footprint. buy less often, support local makers, mend. If you can, learn how to sew, refashion. One thing that I really love to do is kind of style myself through the clothes I already have. If you are on social media and if you like a website called Pinterest, I really like it because I can literally type in green shirt, orange skirt, and we'll get a dozen images of outfits that have those two elements in it. So things like that are just kind of simple, and you don't have to go, you're not trying to necessarily save the whole entire industry, but you're doing one thing today to help you help pushes the stone further down the road. And next slide. So this is just like my slide, just like take a break, because I know that a lot of it seems like a lot and it seems too big, but the next group of slides are going to continue to talk about what we can do, the small steps that we can do that can help make a big difference. And next slide. That was the water flow. So at the beginning, even though I'm an eco-fashion designer and I'm very interested in circular economy and sustainability, and actually trying to work on a regenerative design process to actually make things better than it was before I started. I'm not someone who's dogmatic or critical, or like putting people down if they do have to go ahead and buy that $10 dress or $15 dress. I know that is what people have to do. Some people have to do that. But if we can be at the one end of the continuum and do nothing, or we can think about it as doing a little bit more, doing a little bit more, doing a little bit more. So what are the little steps that we can do every day, every week, every year to push it further down the sustainable path so that we are doing better for the human family, the beyond human family, and the planet? And next slide. So one thing is, to quote Jizza of the Wu-Tang, read the label. You gotta read the label. You gotta read the label. When you're buying something, read the label. When you are mending, read the label. When you are recycling or upcycling, read the label. Find out what it's made of. Find out who made it. Find out where and what it is, so that you can really make the smart choices, and so that you can really know, like, do I really need this cotton polyester shirt, or can I go ahead and buy that organic cotton shirt if I'm going to make that purchase? And next slide. Repurpose. Repurposing is a great thing to do. These are bags made out of t-shirts. I know that a lot of people, a lot of stores now, because of COVID, are not letting you use repurposed or bring in your own bags, and are kind of making you take out plastic bags. But in the long term, repurposing, making bags out of t-shirts and things like that are something that's simple, it's easy to find online, and it's really a great way to keep those clothes out of the landfill. And next. We talked a little bit about mending your clothes. Now, I sew, but I found this really cool website that actually has about 9 to 10 different things that you could do if you don't sew, because I know not everybody sews, that can help mend clothes. One is to replace a zipper tag or tab or a jean button, but go on Goheen Designs blog, and they will have some really great examples of how to mend without knowing how to sew. So don't let not knowing how to sew prevent you from mending your clothes. So we talked a little bit about the slow fashion movement and how what can happen from everything from reducing the carbon footprint to less waste to buying less, really having fairer wages, because again, 80% of the fashion industry supply chain women touch. And if women are underpaid, if women are not being supported, that is a human rights issue. And so fashion is a human rights issue. And in order to make it more equitable and more sustainable, really we have to look at all these different ways of how, when we make the right decision, the impact goes beyond just what we're wearing and what feels, but it's actually better for the environment. And next slide. So to wrap it up, some of the things that I recommend, and this will echo some of the early speakers as well. Read the label, repurpose, reuse, mend rather than spend. And now I have to reiterate, I'm a fashion designer. I sell clothes. So telling you to mend your clothes isn't helping me at all, but I'm telling you to mend your clothes. Shop your closet. Before you buy something, go ahead and go to Pinterest and find out outfit ideas, whether it's for a Zoom virtual wedding or whether it's for a socially distanced picnic. Come up with an outfit. There's a reason why you bought those things in the first place. So enjoy the clothes that you already have. Donate for a specific use, or consign clothing. Clothes swap. I've gotten some really great items of clothes just from swapping with friends. Limit your use of paper products. Make some washcloths. Make dish towels and things that you can use over again. If you're washing polyester, we all have polyester, and piling toxic fabric, use a microfiber catching bag. And then buy less. Again, I said I'm a fashion designer. I want you to buy my clothes, but I actually want you to buy less. So if that means not buying from me, then that's great. But buy less, and just do a little bit more every day, every week, every year. You don't have to try to do everything at once. Just try to do something that can help both the environment, and I keep saying the human family and the beyond human family. And then the next slide, I think, are just pictures of the beautiful women I work with. So thanks so much for letting me speak and for being part of this really exciting conversation.
Thank you so much, Tereneh. That was great. Thank you to all the speakers. That was a lot of new information for me to learn about, and I hope others learned a lot too. Let's go ahead and start opening up for questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat box yet, but if you have a question you'd like to ask, go ahead and type it in the chat box. Well, I can start with a couple questions that I jotted down as I was listening. So we know that there are there's incentive programs to get people to buy, say, or at least there used to be, to buy an electric car or a hybrid vehicle. And there are incentives to, use green energy, switch to wind energy. Are there any sort of incentives in this field to reduce waste, especially when it comes to, say, larger institutions, anything like that at the national level?
There's starting to be more incentives for fashion designers. It is something that fashion has been really, as an industry, has been really reluctant to take responsibility for fashion, really horrible environmental record. So things like getting certified, sustainably certified, is one thing. Companies like Burberry, Chanel, some of the other brands that do not that used to burn unsold garments have stopped doing that because they've kind of been shamed into once it became more public, got shamed into, like, you actually burning clothes is actually a really bad idea. So is there a way that you can recycle, repurpose, and to redistribute those clothing and textiles? And also because of COVID and some of the environmental issues, injustice issues around that, there's been a larger conversation about how do we get new designers involved in the fashion industry. And so while new design seems like it would be the opposite of what we need to do, but a lot of the newer, smaller designers are actually working with working sustainably, with recycling and upcycling, and also looking at expanding the fashion industry. So it's not just the global North and global West, but also the global South, and having those designers being involved so that you are not looking at appropriation, looking at waste, but you're actually looking at groups of people who are already coming from a more sustainable, more circular way of producing that can then bring that knowledge into the fashion industry. So you're seeing more, for example, more partnerships between indigenous communities. You're seeing more partnerships with people, designers from Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Africa, and places like that. So that kind of indigenous innovation that has more of a circular economy and more circular way of doing things can hopefully influence the fashion industry as a whole. But right now I feel like it's too much self-regulation and not enough of a real industry-wide, like you really have to do these things. It's like a choice rather than a mandate. And I think that's where the fashion industry is still falling short.
Okay, thank you. We have gotten a lot more chatter on the chat box. So can anyone donate for Pitt Textile Recycling Program? Aurora, I think you answered that, but if you just want to say it for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but anyone can donate to Pitt's Textile Recycling Program. The 20 locations are open to the public. However, due to campus limitations, due to COVID, not all of those locations are currently open. I do have a list of folks. I will say it's one of the top things that we've gotten questions about from the public in COVID, because people are cleaning out their houses and they're like, well, put this somewhere. Like, we're not open quite yet. But once students are back on campus and have been quarantined, we do anticipate being able to open up a few of those locations to the public. So.
And then, Leah, do you have any online workshops that you can offer?
I never have in the past, but it's something that I would be open to exploring.
Let's see. Another question is, does the fabric recycler at Pitt accept all types of materials? Can off-campus people leave worn-out clothes in the barrels?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes, but no mattress toppers. Students tend to have a lot of mattress toppers, and my windows are open. I'm not sure if you can hear the rain. Yeah, so no mattress toppers, no like foam types of things. Those are generally like a no, but any like actual, woven textiles are fully acceptable.
Okay, cool. And we have some links in the chat box that if folks want to look at that later. Are there any brands or stores that are especially good or bad?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think, it really depends on what you want to buy. And again, I think that if you want to start with getting something new, I always just I kind of just go through this process like, do I really need it? Do I really, really need it? Why do I really need it? And if I can buy it secondhand, I definitely do that. I'm a huge fan of eBay and Etsy, and a huge fan of vintage pieces across the board. And Pittsburgh is one of the most amazing vintage of cities in the world. I'm not saying that hyperbolically. I'm saying that for real. I mean, when I was living in New York bars would when I say I was from Pittsburgh, they would say, "Oh, Pittsburgh, we do buying trips there to buy vintage from Pittsburgh all the time." So I think that's a starting point. I also feel like Pittsburgh is lucky because we have a lot of sustainable brands, and I don't know if it's because we have so many women who are in charge of fashion brands, which is actually kind of rare in a strange way, because the fashion industry tends to be more led by men. But I see Kelly Sanders here from Love Pittsburgh. Love Pittsburgh is a really great place to shop. They're really thoughtful on having local and sustainable brands and sustainable designers. There are bigger companies like Patagonia that does a good job. Burton does a good job looking at like buying getting recycled materials and upcycling and being able to return products for them to then reuse. So they are out there, but you do have to do your research. And luckily in Pittsburgh, we just have a lot of really great brands that you actually, Rachel, showed in your presentation. So I'm thankful for that.
Great. Another question that's come in, I think this is geared towards Aurora. Does the clothing makeup affect how readily they are recycled or used as industrial rags as opposed to reuse? Like the clothing type, whether it's rayon or polyester.
That's a great question. I think when Simple Recycling looks at the items, they look at the condition of the item more than the material. So, a less durable textile is just as likely to find a reuse as it is to, find its way into like actual recycling. However, I think it's also more likely to be damaged even before it gets to that stage, and that's why I would hope it would end up in our bins, and I would hope if it still has a use, you would donate it to a reuse location.
Okay. The next question, you might be able to see this yourself in the chat, but I'm just going to read them out for everybody's benefit. For Tereneh, how do you navigate the line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So what we do at Idia'Dega is we actually come up with a theme, an idea. For example, I talked about the healing collection. So I'll say, I'm thinking about healing, I'm thinking about women as scientists, and could you talk a little bit about the healing tradition in the Maasai community, the healing tradition in the Oneida community? We have those conversations and I sketch out some ideas. Those ideas then are shown to the women from the Maasai community and the Oneida community, which they can approve or disapprove the designs based on my sketches. I then create the sample garment, and then the beadwork is then added into that design. So everything that's created really comes from a shared idea and a shared idea of what the designs are. So if I come up with a design or an idea that they disapprove of, then it doesn't get made. Or for example, if I'm in the Maasai village, and this happened more than one time, and I see something that I really, really love, and I kind of grab it and go, oh my gosh, we should make a version of this. And they'll say, no, we're not, because it's for us. You can't wear it. We're not making it for anyone else to wear, and we're not selling it. And I'm like, cool, that's good. Same thing in the Oneida Indian Nation. I had this really great idea for a design, and I went to the elder who was in charge of the heritage, the kind of part of the Heritage Council of the Oneida Indian Nation. I said, I have this really great idea for this design, and it's blah, 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 blah. And he said, no, you can't do that. I said, okay, no problem. So it's really a collaboration. It's really a shared vision. So there's nothing, if I ever come up with something that's going to be inappropriate or appropriating, they will call me on it before it even leaves my sketch pad. It's just not going to happen.
And another question for Aurora, are the materials put in the bins sorted for immediate usability before heading to recycling?
Yeah, so the university, due to volume, does not sort materials that go in the bin. So that's one of the reasons that we emphasize, if you want to donate something to a reuse store or take it for consignment, do that first. These bins are really, we're pushing them for textile recycling at best, although, if something does end up in the bin that's reusable, Simple Recycling likes that, and they'll make sure that it finds a home, although not in this region, in full transparency. And so the comment that I put in the chat is, if you're looking for a single location where you can drop off to both a thrift store and recycling, the O'Hara Student Center is the best place to do that. Also, once it opens back up after COVID, it's not really that populated. It's a fairly empty building overall. It's, there's parking, it's got its own little parking lot. It's right off of O'Hara Street. So it's an easy drop off, although note that you are dropping off to a student thrift store. So they have, specific needs and sizes that they need.
Okay. Okay. A question for Tereneh. How do you decide who to collaborate with and reach out to, and what was that engagement like?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree is in business. So when I initially reached out to the Maasai community, I actually emailed a Maasai elder, and I asked if they would be interested in working with me. And he said, we don't know you, so we can't answer that question. But what you could do is come here, and he used the term sit in a circle, and then we'll find out whether or not we want to work with you. So when I had gone to graduate school in Kenya, so I had met and connected with people from Kenya, so I was able to go back there. I went to the Maasai village, and it's a village I had never been to. And I just sat there for weeks at a time. Every day I would just sit with the women. And then after a few weeks, the head of the group, we call the chair lady, said, what do you want? Why do you keep showing up? And when I explained what I wanted and why I kept showing up, they agreed. But it took several weeks. And the same thing with the Oneida community. I went to a powwow, a cultural festival, and met with people. The one group of women that said yes was the Beating Wolves, a family of beaters, and they said that they might want to work with me. So I spent a couple months traveling through the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, of which Pittsburgh is traditionally one of those places. This is where the Seneca were. The Seneca are the keepers of the Western Door, which is Pittsburgh, which is Idia'Dega, which is why I call my company Idia'Dega, in respect to the Haudenosaunee who were here. And I spent this time learning as much as I could about the Oneida. So basically, I wanted to start with African and a Native American group. And now I'm trying to expand. I was supposed to be in Chile last month, but of course that changed. And I was in India earlier this year. So it's really people who are interested in creating a new global creative community and connecting women for self-empowerment, so that they can have the power to decide what happens in their community around the world in a way that we currently don't have.
Another question for all the panelists: are there any workspaces or co-ops in Pittsburgh that are specific to slow fashion or upcycled repurposed fashions? And they go on to say, we have a studio, workshop, and homestead, and are interested in to get something started here. And this is from Jonathan Eberly.
I don't know of any. The closest thing I can think of is the Center for Creative Reuse. They have sewing machines, they have thread, they have buttons. I mean, most of what I make things with is from there, other than the fabric, and even like the finishings. Most of my thread and elastic and things come from them. But I think it would be great to have a center dedicated to slow fashion, and whether that means, one thing that I really wanted to figure out how to do is, how can we develop a guild where we're doing combined buying, so that, if sometimes you just need to buy a new zipper, and you just need to buy new buttons, and you just need to buy new thread. So how is there a way that we as makers in Pittsburgh, we combine together and actually buy and create together in a way that can help save money and carbon footprint on shipping and things like that? So I think that's a great idea. I would join that thing.
Any other comments from the other panelists about that?
My mind went in the same direction, that the closest place I could think of was Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse. They've held workshops like this there before.
Every now and then at the university, if you want to hang out with a bunch of students, Thriftsburg's birthday party is usually, think it's in April. I could have it entirely wrong, but they do a Fix-It Fest, and they'll bring out, sewing machines and things and teach some things, as I said in the chat, about something else. They're not professionals, but it's a good place to get started and access.
And I think this is the last question. Tereneh, when is your exhibit at the Carnegie Museum?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's called Locally Sourced, and it's featuring local makers in Pittsburgh, a lot of them sustainable fashion designers in Pittsburgh. And I want to say it opens in September or November. November? I don't know when it opens. It was supposed to open this summer, so like everything changed. But I'm embarrassed. I can't think of when it opens. But it's called Locally Sourced. It opens in the fall. I think it opens in November because they don't have my stuff yet. And I think if it opened in September, they would have my stuff. So I'm going to say November. But it's going to be really wonderful, and it's going to feature all local designers. And I think it's really great that the Carnegie is opening up its galleries to local designers and local artists, because I think it's a great way to elevate and to center design in a museum setting, and especially local designers.
If you're someone that has very little or no experience with sewing, mending, any of that, what would be, I know there's lots of online resources, but what would you think is the first best step for someone to take? Like, what is a website or a person they absolutely need to follow to get
the first place I would go would be Fashion Revolution. The Fashion Revolution website really is a great resource. It's a great start. It's a great starting point, and it's a source for me for both inspiration and information. So that would be the first place I would go. I would go to Fashion Revolution, and also the slow fashion movement would also be really great. A great, simple place to start.
A couple more questions have come in. Does the COVID-19 PPP loan program provide a means of support for expanding textile work in Pittsburgh?
I don't know anyone who got that money. Who got that money? I know Kanye got the money. I know some of the big brands got the money. I didn't get any. I don't know anyone who got that money. I'm going to say no.
Okay, well, I think that I've covered all the questions that have come in. And we got a lot of great feedback. People say inspiring and just a lot of great information. So I just want to thank our speakers again. This was really wonderful. I learned a lot, and I'm really glad that we're putting on these series to talk about issues that are, not even necessarily in GASP's comfort zone. This is new information for us, but whenever we're thinking about making the world a better, greener place, it is a lot about the choices that each of us make on an individual basis, at home, work, and play. And so, learning how we can make smarter choices and learning about the great organizations and businesses right here in our backyard is an important first step to take. And then one other project I wanted to just let you know about is our new Amplify Your Voice project. This is an opportunity to help amplify the voices of people, especially in frontline communities and young people who may live in the neighborhoods that are most impacted by air pollution and then the public health issues that it exacerbates. And so by amplifying their voice, it's an opportunity for all of us to listen about their ideas about how to make the world and Allegheny County a better, cleaner place, and for them to have a chance to tell their story in their own words. And that might be a poem, it might be a blog post, it might be a song, it might be a video they put together. We're encouraging people to be creative about this. And so you can learn more about this project on our website just by searching for Amplify. It will come right up. This is a little bit more about GASP. If you want to learn about our upcoming events or more about the work that we're doing in the community, go to our website, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, if you have any questions about tonight or in the future, you can email us at info@GASP, and that'll get your question will get to the right person. And of course, GASP is a membership organization. So if you like the work that we do, you think it's important, then I would greatly challenge you and encourage you to become a member of the organization. You can do all of that on our website. You can learn more about volunteer opportunities. There's a plethora of information on our website, so I'd encourage you to go on and check that out. So thank you again, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you at a future presentation.